So I think if we look back to where this all started from, so we go back to kind of the CMA9 ruling, open banking in the UK, the OBIE being established, PSD2 all around the same time. I think the UK had a really good model of driving an agenda forward with the trustee of the OBIE. And we got a very long way in a very short amount of time. You know, AI account information came out, I think it was within almost 18 months of kind of the establishment of the OBIE, and then 2 years, or less than actually in the UK, maybe 18 months to do the payment side of things. Europe trailed behind, a little bit more so in PIS than AIS, but the real challenge came when COVID hit. And there was a roadmap from the OBI in the UK to provide variable recurring payments, which you see everywhere. There was trusted beneficiaries, so a way not to re-authenticate every time, so essentially like a DD or a card on file, bank on file type piece. And that never happened either. And the other one that we were obviously really keen on was premium data. So being able to get more than just name on account and sometimes address that we get in the UK, making that more expansive. And ironically, the US has done a better job of commercializing that than the UK or Europe actually did. So we've got POCs we work with some of the larger banks in the UK around premium data, but being able to have name, address, date of birth, your email address, your phone number as like a core set of personal attributes was really the promise. And then to be able to take that into, you know, subscription payments, SaaS with variable recurring payments, that would have been fantastic. That happens. We're still fighting now around who really takes ownership for it. You know, there was a point where Visa were trying to run a scheme that would replicate kind of the VRP kind of trust framework. Now we're finding, you know, they're trying to bring a consortium together, and I'm not sure that's particularly working. I think in America, in contrast to the UK and Europe, America saw a commercial opportunity and what they had in front of them and grabbed it by both horns. So even though the US has got 1033 as a way to kind of push that forward, the UK and Europe never really commercialized open banking the way they possibly could. So it would have been nice, and it will be nice when PSD3 starts, let's say, normalizing the ecosystem. It's going to make it easier to integrate, to do kind of PIS across regions. Italy's been a problematic country for us. Most of the countries are fine, but there are banks that are still challenged. PSD3 should harmonize, normalize all that and make that much easier for us. But again, there's been no central kind of framework on what does a piece of data look like, what does a token look like to make a payment. So this is why you end up with lots and lots of open banking infrastructure companies, because it is a really big exercise to try and standardize that under one API. And good luck to all of them. We're building payments over the top of that. If I had my laundry list of things I'd love, I mean, personal data would be one of it, just expanding out the kind of palette of data that would be mandated from the banks to really drive open finance. We don't have that right now. Name on account is great, but we've already got confirmation of pay within the card space. So, you know, why can't we get more from what should be open at the end of the day? I think harmonizing of journeys, the OBI originally took a great view on the kind of UX and how this stuff should flow. App-to-app redirection doesn't really exist in Europe. You know, you have to enter an IBAN to even start a journey. Like, why are we doing that when you can flip open a banking app and start? So for me, it's standards and compliance, but also just making actually trying to work on the journey that works rather than being just compliant. And a lot of the banks we initially worked with in Europe were very much, their attitudes to PSD2 was, you know, I think the quote was, we neither have the resources nor the inclination to comply with the regulation. I'm literally saying I'm not going to do what I'm meant to do. So some enforcement would be helpful, from whether that's kind of the European Payments Council, whether it's like the EBA. Somebody needs to take control for standards and enforcement. I think the banks have been, like I said before, more open in the US to commercial relationships than banks across Europe. The only real bank that's overtly tried to champion like a bank of APIs is, of course, NatWest, you know, Royal Bank of Scotland. You know, they've been very active in the community and trying to push out initiatives around personal data, around confirmation, around onboarding. but it takes an independent body to drive that forward, not an individual bank. So, as much as we like working with individual banks, none of them are going to turn the needle unless everybody's needle moves effectively. So, a good banking partnership is driven by the regulators in collaboration with the banks of what can we commercialize? How would the banks make money out of this? The original challenge behind PSD2, certainly in Europe, was if there's no commercialization and we're running the rails for all of these payment companies like ourselves, why would we do a good job? We're actually losing money. We're making payments instant. We don't have interest anymore. Why would we not take issuer fees from our cards? So there's a little bit of kind of, I guess, passive aggression that developed in the early days. I think if Europe can get its head around normalization and thinking about commercial relationships, there is money on the table from the fintech side to take that data, normalize it, and present it back in something that forms strong onboarding use cases, strong subscription, repeat payment, direct debit type mandate use cases, but they have to be driven by an external, a regulator, or another independent body. Otherwise, every bank will splinter and do its own thing, or not do its own thing, as the case may be. No, so we're both. So as a company, our North Star mission is to connect identity and money. So we have a very specific journey for what we call regulated markets, where you would normally upload a passport, a driving license, and typically a bank statement. So we do that in front of the payment transaction, which is typically where you find friction. So if you ask somebody to go, give me a bank statement to identify who you are, they'll run to the hills screaming. But if you do it at the inflection point of when somebody wants to do something, i.e. put money on account and trade or whatever that happens to be, that ask for information on that journey tends to work really, really, really well. So, I guess the kind of cut and thrust for us is we spend a lot of time on data normalization, on transaction categorization. There's an opportunity there with the banks. The banks actually know where a lot of these transactions are outside of the kind of MIC codes or SIC codes that they get. They can provide more information, but they choose not to. So, being able to kind of deepen the transactional information we get, surface that to us and normalize it, there's a strong opportunity there, alongside personal identity and all the other things that banks are guardians of. I think I champion it all the time. It's normalization and standards, and it's actually enforcing the banks to do a good job, rather than do a job that doesn't really work particularly well, but just kind of ticks the boxes of regulation. I think there's a strong private banking partnerships that can be kind of made over time. It would be good to get a broad agreement of what the commerciality of that could look like for the banks. It's a bit like how the payment rail networks work across Europe and how the central banks plug into them, and how we pay for these things, right? A standard there would be really, really, really useful, right? And I think you could drive that in the UK through Vocalink, through faster payments networks. That's an opportunity to start collaborating. Over in Europe, Target2 and all of its friends could look to help us out with that. But it needs dispute resolution, it needs standards and all the things that are kind of missing from the card frameworks to drive that forward. But it's such an upside to consumers not to have data lost, cards lost. Banks, insurers and telcos are the best representation of identity that we've got in its current form. Given everyone's got splintered identity standards, banks should be able to take advantage of that.